we are going to share Luca'S birth story. And it really kind of goes back to the pregnancy at our 20-week anatomy scan. So we went in for our 20-week anatomy scan, and immediately the technician had seen that there was a club foot. So she had brought the doctor, and the doctor shared with us that the baby had a club foot. And I don't know about you, but I immediately was like crying already, because I didn't know anything about a club foot. I didn't know like if Luca would have trouble walking or running or doing sports or anything like that.
And none of our other 3 kids had ever had anything come up during their pre-birth scans, like at all, like no even really minor things or concerns or anything like that. So it was like the first time we had ever had even like a very minor red flag before birth. So yeah, it was definitely interesting, definitely a little bit scary. They tried to kind of obviously assure us that clubfoots can be an isolated issue, and they brought us into a consultation with a high-risk doctor. At that point, they just kind of shuffled us over to high risk. And when we found we were going to the high-risk physician's care or whatever for the next however long, indefinitely, I think that kind of heightened the alert a little bit and made us a little bit more, added some trepidation to the whole process. But again, they tried to kind of reassure us that is more or less just a protocol, and that part of what they're going to try to figure out is whether or not the clubfoot was an isolated issue or if it was tied to a larger syndrome, genetic problem. So they were trying to identify with additional scans. We went back for twice as many anatomy scans that we had with any of our other kids to kind of continue doing checkups, to really, for those of you, most people probably don't know, the clubfoot is something that can be just a random kind of genetic thing that happens with how the foot grows, but it can also be tied to a number of different things, and it doesn't necessarily confirm or deny anything. So there's a breadth that it could be nothing, but it could definitely be something. If it is something, it could be really scary. It could be not very scary at all. It's just kind of out there. So not very reassuring, but kind of put us in the position with the doctor of just trying to weed out the scariest things right away. Yeah.
And even I think in that 20-week scan too, he had also first said the clubfoot thing. I was kind of like mentally freaking out, but then he had mentioned something about Luca having a smaller cerebellum and like a thicker thing of like thicker skin right in between his eyes. And so and then he brought us back to the room. We were freaking out. I was freaking out. I was really worried that something really bad was gonna be happening with Luca, where maybe he wouldn't live, and honestly, totally transparent, like I was not obviously prepared to like raise a child with special needs, and that was like really scary to think about, to think that my kiddo could be have severe disabilities and I didn't know what to do, and that's just really life-changing. So that was truly a fear that was in my mind. And I had brought it up to my therapist too, like I just don't know. I don't know what I would do. Like obviously I would keep my child no matter what we found out, but I don't want to have a child with special needs like that. Nobody asks for that. Yep. And that's okay to feel. If you're a parent coming here and you're having those feelings, that is okay and it's normal, and like no one asks for this, you just do it and you deal with it and you learn to love and grow. But
I think parenthood, right, is hard enough as it is, and even in a very quote unquote smooth, or we want to call it like normal experience with your raising a child, especially probably your first child or your first couple of children, there's like those moments of like, oh man, am I cut out for this? Did I bite off more than I can chew? Exactly. Like, doing a disservice to my child or whatever in just a normal scenario. So when you start thinking about the added in layers of having a child who's going to need some interventions and things like that, I think it just kind of like heightens the fear there and makes it obviously way more real. Like definitely a little bit of panic happening behind the scenes, but at that early stage, like trying to keep things a little bit chronological, we were still trying to stay mostly positive. The doctors were trying to reassure us that it didn't, what they were seeing so far didn't necessarily mean that there was a larger syndrome or larger issue, that it could be, again, could be something, could be basically nothing. The doctor's first concern, again, was just trying to make sure that Luca was going to be born healthy and like safely, I guess, and not having like life-threatening issues, kind of number one. And then kind of monitoring everything else. And in that first, just as a side note, in that first scan, when we found out that there were some abnormalities that came up in his anatomy, there was, like I said, there was some tears shed, there was definitely some panic, and we had been planning up to that point to be surprised whether it was going to be a boy or a girl, because we had found out with all of our previous children whether it was what the gender was leading into, or what the sex was leading into the birth. In that specific instance, Emily told me, and I completely agreed in the moment, that we don't want to go home and have the only thing that we knew or that was revealed to us about the child that day was that he had a problem, right? That there was an issue with his birth. So we had already kind of been leaning towards specific names, like a short list of names, and we decided that his name was Luca that day, and kind of like set in stone by finding out the gender. Obviously.
Well, I think Luca we thought was like kind of a name that could go either way for a boy or a girl. And during the ultrasound, while I was looking at the screen and the doctor was telling me about his clubfoot and his brain, the name Luca just kept coming into my head. And then on the drive home, Eric was like, what's a name that was kind of low on my list before, but now is kind of a higher contender? And I was like, what? And he's like, Luca. And I was like, are you serious? Like, during the ultrasound, that is the name that kept popping in my brain. So that's how I was like, all right, that's what it is. And then we decided on his middle name being Ryan, because that's Eric's middle name. But Luca means bringer of light, and Ryan means little king, and all of those things are really true about him right now. But in the sense of staying on topic now, we'll go back to just making this quick. We kept going back for more ultrasounds about every 4 weeks, and his cerebellum continued to be small, but it still was growing with the rest of him, but it was still behind where it should have been. But basically by the end of it, we graduated from the maternal fetal medicine and saying like, hey, he should be okay, but there's really no way for us to know the function of his brain until he's born. And we had felt strongly that we didn't want to have
invasive.
And the invasive, I think it's amniocentesis genetic testing, because it is risky. It can cause pregnancy loss. So that we were just like, well, we will just have him, if we still feel like he needs to be tested, we'll get his genetics tested after he's born, because we're keeping him. It's not like it's going to influence our decision.
And kind of the silver lining or the back and forth there was, because the cerebellum was still fully formed, all the structures looked good, everything else about his anatomy looked like it was progressing normally, so everything was really positive and seemed happy and good. But the part, again, that kind of was always sitting, I think, in the back of our minds was, because the cerebellum was still small, because he still has his clubfoot, even though everything else seems to be going well, it was still very much up in the air in terms of, could be something, it could be nothing. So we didn't really...
we never got a really good reassuring answer ever.
We knew that he was going to be able to be, go full term and be born healthy. There was no concerns from the doctors and the physicians about any of that stuff, so that mortality fear was addressed. But we were basically at the end of our options and end of the possibilities in terms of figuring out whether there was going to be a larger issue, unless if we did the kind of invasive genetic testing, which you said we didn't want to do.
Yeah. So I feel like after we graduated from that, I kind of like put it all behind me in the sense of like thinking that everything was going to be totally normal and fine.
Yeah.
And you know, it was ended up being quite the surprise. We were at my best friend Tori's wedding, and I was in the wedding. Eric was attending the wedding. I was 36 weeks pregnant. And we were constantly joking, Tori and I. Well, maybe more she. She was like, wouldn't it be so funny if you had the baby at my wedding? My husband Derek, it's Derek. Well, he's a paramedic, so you know he could deliver your baby for you. And I was like, absolutely not. We're not doing that. So the whole thing was, we just got to get through the wedding. We just got to get through the wedding, and then he can come. And that was the joke. Obviously, we were thinking way after the wedding. But anyway, we're at the wedding. I'm in it. He's attending. We got our kids. Eric's mom is there. My mother-in-law, she's amazing. And we get through it a little bit, and she says, hey, I'll take the boys home, because our little boys were there, and you and Eric just have a little date night and just hang out, have fun, dance, whatever. So that's what happens. She takes them home, and I'm dancing on the dance floor. Eric was dancing with me. I had ice cream that dribbled all down my beautiful bridesmaid's dress, and I was dancing. He left the dance floor to go get a cigar at the cigar bar. Mm-hmm. And I will never forget. I'm dancing. I drop it low, and my water breaks. And I was like, did I just pee myself? Oh my gosh, what the heck? And I'm like, I think and then I just like was testing it out. So I like kept dancing really hard and stepping hard, and like more was just gushing. I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't peeing your pants. This is much different. So I didn't know where Eric went, so I was running around frantically, like, oh my gosh, I think my water broke. Mm-hmm. Blah, blah, blah. So then I find him at the cigar bar, and I'm like, hey, I'm like 80% sure that my water broke. And then he's like running, I will never forget, he's like running around behind me with a cigar that he literally hasn't touched to his lips yet, just lit it, and he's like, following me around, and it was so funny. So, went to the bathroom, checked, yes, water was definitely broken. And then, I go to find my friend, Tori, whose wedding it was, and the fireworks are starting because they're having fireworks. And I'm like, hey, I gotta go. The baby's coming and my water broke. She's like, oh my gosh. And then she literally said to her husband, Derek, can we drive them to the wedding? And to the hospital. We drive to the hospital, and I was thinking like, you're crazy. This is your wedding. You're not gonna do that. Mm-hmm. And then I think she like was like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't leave my own wedding, you know. So one of our other friends, another bridesmaid, Cece, and her husband Dustin drove us to the hospital, and I was having contractions. I was ordering a car seat on the way to like a Target pickup order because we were not prepared. We didn't even have a go bag.
Yep. Our last two kids were born a week early, and then like a couple weeks early. So we kind of assumed it was going to be somewhere in that range, or maybe like 3 weeks, that we had some time. Yeah. We assumed wrong, obviously. So we were completely unprepared.
Yeah.
And we're like ordering everything that we needed to even just stay overnight, to stay at the hospital. So yeah, it was fun.
It was exciting. It was really
It
funny.
was a good story to get passed around right when we got to the hospital. With the last two kids, every time we went to the hospital, we had a few fake outs. So there was a couple times they actually sent us home with Teddy. Yeah. And then with Henry, even with him, it took, we were there for hours before from the time she started labor until birth happened. And they had us kind of wait in the, what do they call it?
They checked us first. To make sure that you're in labor, they like check how much you're dilated, see if your water is broken, all that stuff. But my water had never broken with any of my other kids on its own.
So that was the first time we got there. We got the express pass. As soon as we came in the doors, the nurses were like, "We believe you." Go to
my dress was soaking wet, and it was just so funny. Everyone was like, kind of looking like, "Why are they so dressed up?" Like, what the heck?
And it was like midnight by the time we got there, like 11 o'clock at night. So we were kind of the only ones there.
Yeah, and our daughter Lily, she's 11. She was with us because she wanted to be there for the birth. So
so it was a super fun thing. Lily got to be there, and all the nurses and doctors passed around the story of how she had this fancy dress on because she went to birth at her best friend's wedding.
Yeah, everyone came in and was like, I heard you were at a wedding. Tell me about this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a fun story.
And this was also the first time throughout, it still took several hours from the time labor started until he was actually born, Luke was actually born. But this is the first time that, Emily didn't require any sort of any sort of assistance from, I forget what it's called, Pitocin to go into labor. We had a fantastic nurse who helped Emily try all the different positions with the birthing ball and lifting the bed up and down. She was lifting Emily up and down and going through all kinds of crazy stuff, breaking a sweat. So that whole process of getting to active labor was like the first time I think he had like all naturally, which was kind of a cool bit. And she was switching me a lot because they couldn't get a good Luca'S heart kept falling off of the monitor. Like they couldn't keep him on, so they kept flipping me around because his heart rate was dropping, which they were like, okay, well, keep an eye out on what to do. And I'm just like, not sure, like, is this, am I going to need a C-section, blah, 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 whatever. And all throughout that, I think we were still had everything that happened kind of in the
I
danger
wasn't thinking
zone.
about it.
Everything that happened before was kind of, I think, still off our minds. We were kind of like trying to think positively and thinking that like everything, the maybe blips in the heart monitor or whatever was just a random fluke or something just associated with like the nature of his birth process and not associating it at all with any things that we had learned about during his anatomy scans. But, kind of differently later.
Yeah. So then I think we can just skip to the part where we started labor. I was fast. Yeah, a couple pushes, and he was out, and he had the softest little cry, and but they need to take him and get him on oxygen right away. So he was on oxygen for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, he was just breathing. They could tell he was breathing, and they heard him cry, obviously. And I think still at this moment, I was still not super worried because Henry, our second child.
Yeah, second. Yeah.
He was also kind of, had a little bit of trouble, needed some help breathing when he was first born too. So I kind of had been there, done that, and this seemed not as bad as Henry's was actually.
Yeah.
So I was like, obviously everyone with birthing is traumatic for sure. So I was like a little bit worried, but not super worried. And he starts like get his color back pretty much right away. They had him on the CPAP, not even like up the nose or anything like that, but just a little mouth covered for like 20 minutes, just the nurse holding it there. And then it seemed like it was basically back to business as usual. They gave him over to Emily and we cut the cord and everything. And it was.
You were over next to the baby. Obviously, I was still in the delivery bed. Lily was next to me, and I remember her and I saying, like, he sounds like a little cat. Oh my gosh, he sounds like a little kitty over there.
Yep.
Which we would come to find out is the number one, indicator that the baby, like the first indicator that a baby would have Cre-Du shot, which is what Luca, it was
one of the fun things about Cre-Du shot is that it's kind of, I guess it's similar to a lot of other genetic syndromes, but I think maybe a little bit more broad spectrum in that there's a lot of different things that could possibly be abnormal or, indicators of the Cre-Du shot syndrome. not a ton that show up every single time, right? So the indicators and the visible or audible, the things you'll notice about your child and that are indicative of previous shock can be very different from kid to kid. But one of the like 2 or 3 things that's in almost every single case is that like soft cry of the cat.
Yeah, that's what cri de chat means, cry of the cat in French. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. The trivia we learned, but yeah, because the syndrome is so rare, I don't think it was really popped up on anyone's radar. The midwives and the nurses didn't really notice anything, and we were planning on basically the entire time we were there, kind of the standard stay there 1 or 2 nights and then go home. Obviously he was premature, so the doctors recommended like right away that we should just plan on staying 2 nights, just like monitor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then as we were getting to know Luca, and he started to kind of, the swelling and stuff from the traumatic birth process starts to reduce. Emily and I noticed that's the first time I've noticed maybe a few physical indicators of something.
I had noticed I think I even right away I was like, just like a few things that, I just noticed like his eyes were a little like they were pretty deep, like the
eye sockets.
The eye sockets were deep, like the eyelids and the eye, like everything was like way thicker almost.
Yeah.
And his eyes were deep.
The thick
and then
skin
a little
here was
far,
visibly noticeable.
And his eyes were a little far apart from each other.
Little skin tags.
He had skin tags on his ears, and his ears were like flat. Like there was no ridge here. It was just like flat. Mm-hmm. And we can show a picture too. We'll insert a picture here. I gotta learn how to edit. And yeah, so I noticed that right away. And then I actually think after a few days, I thought he started looking more normal. But I had asked them like immediately, I was like, I want genetics. I'm like, I see a couple things that are different looking. I want to get him genetic testing. So they got the genetics team in there like right away. Yeah. We got our blood tested. He got his
took out medical history, family history.
Yeah.
All that good stuff. So we had that consultation right away. And I mean, throughout that process, it's really cool actually. They do, the rapid genetic testing and like the full scan. So they kind of check for, again, the biggest, scariest things like the diagnosis type stuff right away. And so they told us that, we would probably find out within a day or 2 of going home if there was anything that we should be worried about, or there were any like larger diagnosis, and then any like more minor issues, things like maybe he'll be more prone to cancer down the road or whatever, like long term, less immediately scary things comes like a week or 2 later. But yeah, so that was a very quick and easy process to get that set up and done. And I think at that point we were still we were aware that obviously we asked for the test. We were aware that there could be something going on, but we were still not worried really.
As he grew, like a couple, as he was growing, even like on the second day, I was like, as the swelling went down, I felt like it was less noticeable. I was like, oh, he looks pretty consistent, like maybe looks like our other kids a little more.
And he was meeting like all his milestones, so obviously
except eating.
Yeah. Like
he wasn't eating a lot. But I don't think I really realized he wasn't getting enough food. And then his temperature was he couldn't hold his temperature up high. But at this point still,
so
I think we had no idea that maybe the nurses were thinking, oh, this isn't great. And the car seat test was what?
Yeah. So the nurses too, I mean, obviously they're not the ones who give the diagnosis and stuff, and really all the indications that we got from both the nurses and the physicians we talked to was kind of, again, unfortunately, kind of the same thing that happened during the anatomy scans and stuff. Was none of these things were necessarily like outside the realm of normal, especially because he was only born at 36 weeks.
Yeah.
So he's 4 weeks early. Pretty normal for a baby at that stage to maybe have a little trouble with their body temperature or keep their blood sugar up or taking a little bit longer to like learn to latch and nurse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff we were
relating it to preemie. Yeah.
Just a little early.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm in a baby.
Hi. Hi, come here.
How's it?
No, the baby Henry. Henry, can you say hi? Say hi.
Hello.
This is Henry.
He's very tired.
He is very tired. We're having trouble with sleeping. And you know what, Eric, we are going to pause it because our battery's about to die. Okay? So we'll pick back up.
Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, everything that happened up to that point and all the indicators or whatever at that time seemingly minor issues that Luca was having, we were again still kind of everything was in the rearview mirror with the genetic stuff. Even though we asked for the test, we were kind of hoping, I guess, that there would only be something minor, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we were still thinking, just kind of preemie stuff.
Yeah.
But then kind of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of the doctors kind of waving the red flag and saying something is going on here was when Luca failed his car seat test.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Those of you who don't know, or at least in our
Hospital.
if your baby is preemie, they have to pass a car seat test to go home. So basically what that looks like is they get a seat from a car, like that's on wheels, and they install your car seat with the base onto that seat, and then they hook your baby up to monitors, and they monitor their oxygen levels and their heart rate and all that stuff for an hour and a half. So they do this just to make sure that babies are safe, because when babies are little, obviously they have a hard time keeping up their heads. So oftentimes, the babies put their neck down, it cuts off their airway. And Luca failed his car seat test within the first 10 minutes.
His oxygen saturation dropped basically immediately. And then the staff also noticed that when they were doing the circumcision, that he was starting to display, and they weren't super worried about it, I think, up to that point, but really low muscle tone. So obviously, leading up to and during circumcisions, babies will, they usually fuss or move around anytime someone's messing with them, really. But he basically slept through it, or just laid there and didn't do anything. So that's when they started talking to us a little more about the low muscle tone and stuff like that. And so they still didn't give any diagnosis or ask about any additional scans and stuff like that. But they said, you know what, there's just too much going on between taking a long time to eat, low muscle tone.
The low temperature was a really big one.
They said, let's just get him over to the NICU. Hopefully it is just all preemie stuff, and just give him some time to grow. But we also now are concerned that he may have caught a bug or be sick basically sometime in the time he was born. And let's start him on broad range antibiotics while we kind of assess and see what's going on.
Yeah. So we are going to stop there, and we will talk about our NICU stay and the day we found out about Luca'S diagnosis in our next video, so that you don't have to hear us ramble on for too long. All right, thanks guys. We'll be back soon. Bye.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit post notifications for more videos.